The 2021-2022 NBA season was very memorable as we had Russell Westbrook traded to the Lakers, Ben Simmons holdout, and then got traded to the Brooklyn Nets for James Harden. Steph Curry broken the three-point record. LeBron James continuing to dominate at 37 years old. One of the closest full-season MVP races in recent memory with Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Multiple players elevating their game to star, even superstar level status like Jayson, Tatum, and Morant, and are currently having a very entertaining postseason finals with the Golden State Warriors playing the Boston Celtics as they just won in 6 games. And in this video, I'll be doing a complete timeline of the 2021-22 NBA season. This video took almost a week straight of nonstop writing, researching, recording, and editing. It'll be the longest video in the new type of style I'm doing so far, so if you could like the video, that helps so much as I'm trying to hit 30 views on this video. And even though it was technically in the last season, the NBA draft and draft day trades was the first notable thing to occur after the NBA Finals, where Giannis and the Bucks took down the Phoenix Suns. And before the draft was when a lot of the drama occurred, as Landry Shamet would be head to the Suns, Jonas Valanciunas and picks would be swapped for Steven Adams and picks, and Cleveland would get Ricky Rubio in Minnesota, gets Taurean Prince. But of course, the biggest news of the night was Russell Westbrook, as after only one season with the Washington Wizards, would be traded to Los Angeles Lakers to pair up with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But in turn, the Lakers would trade all of their depth back to the Wizards, as Kuzma, KCP, and Montrezl Harrell will be shipped to the Wizards, as well as a 22nd pick, which would be used in later trades to move down and acquire Isaiah Todd and Aaron Holiday. There's no other big trade, and though there would be some other little ones, like the Rockets moving up to get Alperen Sengun, the Hornets moving up to get Kai Jones, and the Knicks repeatedly trading down all draft. That was pretty much it for the draft day trade, but there was some surprises during the draft. Scotty Barnes was taken fourth above Jalen Suggs, and even though the popularity of that grew in the weeks before the draft, it was still a bold pick. Other notable selections are, of course, the top three, where Detroit picked Cade Cunningham, Houston picked Jalen Green, and Cleveland picked Evan Mobley, as well as Josh Giddey jumping up to 6th to the Oklahoma City Thunder, Moses Moody falling to 14th to the Golden State Warriors, Alperen Sengun falling to 16th to the Houston Rockets, and Jared Butler somehow dropping to the second round, where he was picked 40th to the New Orleans Pelicans. Notable undrafted signees include Mac McClung, Austin Reeves, RJ Nembhard, Terry Taylor, Dwayne Washington, Matt Mitchell, and of course, Jose Alvarado. With only a quick 3-day turnaround until free agency negotiations start, there was a good amount of news between them, like Sacramento trading for Tristan Thompson, Atlanta trading for DeLon Wright, and Celtics trading for Josh Richardson in a salary dump trade by the Mavs, and that led to free agency. Now, in the 2021 free agency class, there will be a lot of good veterans like Kawhi Leonard, Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, and on the first day, it was an absolute whirlwind, as I'll roll through the list, as Chris Paul re-signed with Phoenix for 4 years, Mike Conley re-signed with Utah for 3 years, Kyle Lowry went to Miami in a sign-and-trade for 3 years, as Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, and Duncan Robinson signed. DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, and Lonzo Ball signed with Chicago. Tim Hardaway and Reggie Bullock signed with Mavs. Jarrett Allen signed with Cleveland. Will Barton re-signed with the Nuggets. TJ McConnell re-signed with Indiana. Cam Payne and Bobby Portis both returned to their finals teams. Doug McDermott signed with the Spurs. Evan Fournier signed to the Knicks. Devontae Graham was headed to the Pelicans. Gary Trent re-signed with Toronto. Rashawn Holmes re-signed with Sacramento. Norm Powell re-signed with Portland. And the Warriors, Lakers, and Nets all signed players like Otto Porter Jr. and Blake Griffin. That was all in only one day, and some of the best free agents were left. The second day of free agency, it would not be nearly as exciting, as Steph Curry signed a record $250 million deal, but throughout day two, there's mostly minimum deals. That would set the groundwork for some teams like Brooklyn and Golden State, but it would be more the veterans, as Bruce Brown would sign the qualifying offer and would be an unrestricted free agent this offseason. Now, the rest of free agency wouldn't be as exciting, but is headlined by Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard re-signing, the Hawks and Knicks locking in their youngest big men, John Collins and Julius Randle, and Spencer Dinwiddie would sign with the Wizards, as well as Reggie Jackson re-signing, and even in September there would still be deals made, as Michael Porter Jr. signed a max contract, and Clint Capella would return to the Hawks, as well as LaMarcus Aldridge coming out of retirement. Now, heading into the season, this was expected to be one of the best, as there would be the return of the Warriors, but still with loads of parity, with the Lakers, Suns, Warriors, Jazz, Nuggets, and Clippers all expected to compete in the West, But the excitement for the Eastern Conference was at an almost all-time high, as we haven't seen what we thought the level of the East was. And we thought it was at the same level as the West, when the Bucks, Nets, Heat, 76ers, Hawks, Celtics, and Bulls all supposed to compete for the East title, which was a level of depth we haven't seemed to see in ages in the East. The betting odds had the Nets, Lakers, Bucks, Warriors, and Jazz in that order as the title favorites. The award races were also supposed to be amazing, as the MVP race was stacked with Giannis, Luka, Steph, KD, and Embiid, all as some early season favorites. Now, on October 19th, the NBA regular season would officially start, and we get what we thought was potentially the four best teams in the league, as Milwaukee pulled away from Brooklyn in the fourth quarter, and Giannis would have an insane 32, 14, and 7 game. But this game would also mark the official start of Kyrie Irving's holdout, as the Nets would not let him play due to his refusal to get the COVID vaccine, and though I have no political comment on that, Brooklyn would not let him play, and due to state regulations, Kyrie could not even practice with the team. The Warriors would also beat the Lakers, which I already talked about in my last video, which was about Jordan Poole, so check that out after if y'all want to, after the video. But Golden State would beat Los Angeles and would begin the struggles of Russell Westbrook, as he shot 4 for 13 and only scored 8 points. The biggest storyline in the opening week was the NBA 75 team being released, as they're released by 25 players for 3 days, and though I can't list all the players, some of the snubs include Klay Thompson, Dwight Howard, Dikembe Mutombo, Vince Carter, Pau Gasol, Draymond Green, and Tony Parker. Now, in the opening week, there are already some fireworks, as Jaylen Brown dropped 46 points, Steph Curry scoring 45 points off 8 threes, Kevin Durant dropping an insane 29, 15, 12 triple-double, Cole Anthony scoring 29 points with 16 rebounds as a guard along with 8 assists, and Domantas Sabonis put up a monster 33-point, 15-rebound double-double. That was all in just the opening week of the season, and by the end of October, we already had 6 triple-doubles, 8 40-point games, and a plethora of 5-1 teams, like the Warriors, Jazz, Heat, and surprisingly, the Bulls, Knicks, and Wizards. Yes, as a Wizards fan, it was a great time and extremely unexpected, as especially the Wizards and Knicks were not supposed to be this good. At this point, I'll start pointing out news bits as I want to recap some of the less remembered parts of the season. Now, Ben Simmons' drama continued as in November 5th, Ben Simmons' fines would resume. Rashawn Holmes would also have a 2020 game that day. Michael Porter Jr. missed practice due to a back injury that would eventually make him out for a majority of the season. That same day, Ricky Rubio would score 37 points, combined with 10 assists. On November 8th, Nikola Jokic would get pushed by Marcus Morris, and that would push him back, which took him out for 40-plus games, and Jokic was suspended a game. Steph would also drop the first 50 points of the season. He'd be an early MVP favorite. Anthony Edwards would drop for a career-high 48 points. Klay Thompson was rumored to potentially be back by Christmas. Evan Mobley's elbow was injured after a hot start. Zion was clear for contact drills, and on the same day, fellow power forward Giannis dropped 47 points. National media would be appalled that the Lakers started only 8-8. Giannis would have a 32-20 game. LeBron James would elbow Isaiah Stewart, and we all know the story. Stewart tried charging LeBron, and it would take a handful of guys to stop him. And in his return from suspension, LeBron would drop 39. PJ Dozier would tear his ACL, ending his season. Klay would practice in full for the first time since 2019, then about a week later played 5-5. Luke Walton was fired as the Kings head coach after getting out to a 6-11 start, and almost every player on the team was involved in trade rumors. Hawks and Halliburton were deemed unavailable. Evan Mobley would return. The Spurs conducted a player-only meeting. John Morant would be injured and eventually out for 10 games. Michael Porter Jr. would officially miss the rest of the season. Kings would beat the Lakers in triple overtime. Domantas Sabonis puts up a 25-rebound triple-double. Klay Thompson and James Wiseman get sent down to the G League for practice. After November, the players of the month were Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, who were the MVP favorites, and the Warriors and Suns had the best record in the league, while Brooklyn and Chicago led the East, while teams like Philadelphia, Toronto, and the Pelicans were outside of the top 10 in their conferences. Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons were still holding out at the time. Now, to start December, LeBron James supposedly got the virus. That I cannot say, but a day later, we found out was a false positive. But talk about the virus, there's an outbreak that heavily affected the NBA for a month or so, and it led to players like Joe Johnson getting calls up. Zion's rehab was delayed due to soreness. There's a lot of rumors that Goran Dragic would be head to the Mavs as a friend of Luka. Jimmy Butler suffered a tailbone injury, and Indiana had rumors of blowing up the team and trading either Karis LeVert, Domantas Sabonis, or Miles Turner. Nikola Jokic had a 39-point triple-double. Zion reportedly weighed over 330 pounds. Warriors refused to trade James Wiseman, and LeBron James becomes the fifth player to get 100 triple-doubles. The Rockets started fielding offers for Christian Wood. Kevin Durant and Trae Young almost fight. Jeremy Grant suffers a thumb injury. Kevin Durant drops a 51-pointer in a win against the Pistons. Devontae Graham hits a 61-footer, which was the longest game-winning buzzer beater in the last 25 years. Lou Williams exclaimed that if LeBron was dropped in 1975, then he would win 15 titles in a row. Hawks look for trades for Cam Reddish while the Kings shop Hield and Bagley. Chris Middleton suffers a knee hyperextension. Jeremy Grant, Kyrie Irving, and Russell Westbrook are all in trade talks. Dame and Jaylen Brown return while Giannis enters health and safety protocols. Terrence Ross is involved in trade talks for a first-round pick. The Jazz hired Danny Ainge as CEO, and Austin Reeves hits a game winner against the Dallas Mavericks. Steph Curry breaks the three-point record against the Knicks after a slump. He has a heartfelt moment with Rayon and Reggie Miller as he officially becomes the best three-point shooter according to himself. Zion's return is pushed back 4 to 6 weeks, and Lakers sign Isaiah Thomas. Anthony Davis suffered a knee injury that would keep him out for a month. Kyrie Irving would return to practice for the Nets, would eventually play road games. Klay Thompson's return was pushed back to January. Kemba Walker returned for 29 points. Doc Rivers says Ben Simmons may never play for Philly again. John Morant returns from injury and a loss against the Thunder, and JB Bickerstaff is extended to 2027. During the NBA Christmas games, the winners were the Knicks against Atlanta, Milwaukee, led by Giannis 36-12 against Boston, Golden State with Steph's 33 against Phoenix, Brooklyn with Harden's 36-point triple-double against the Lake Show, and the Jazz beating Dallas. Staples Center would officially be renamed to Crypto.com Arena. Russell Westbrook says he thinks he has been fine this year and gets loads of backlash. Paul George suffers a UCL injury, which would keep him out 4 months. Ricky Rubio unfortunately tears his ACL after a great season with the Cavaliers. Steph Curry becomes the first player to ever make 3,000 three-pointers. LeBron scores 43 points with 14 rebounds at New Year's Eve. Also on New Year's Eve, the first trade of the season happened as the Cavaliers trade players' draft rights to get Rajon Rondo to help replace Ricky Rubio. Damian Lillard would play his last game as an abdominal injury would shut him down for the year. Now that ends 2021 as Joel Embiid and Donovan Mitchell win Players of the Month and the Chicago Bulls lead the Eastern Conference. Yes, the Bulls at 24-10, while the Warriors and Suns have the best 2 records in the league while leading the West. Giannis would also take over the number 1 spot in the NBA MVP ladder from Steph, and Steph would not regain the top spot again. On New Year's Day, DeMar DeRozan would hit his second game-winning buzzer beater against Washington, as the day before he hit one against Indiana. Steph would break his own record with 158 consecutive games with a made three-pointer. Jaylen Brown would score 50 points along with 11 boards and a 5-point winning against Orlando, and the next day Trae Young would score 56 points with 15 assists. Kyrie Irving would return and score 22 points. Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr. would be suspended a day for poor behavior. DeMarcus Cousins signed a 10-day with Denver. Klay Thompson, after 2.5 years of being injured, returns with 17 points and a 14-point win against Cleveland. Draymond Green would also suffer a calf injury that would take him out of the Defensive Player of the Year race. Bol Bol would be traded to the Pistons. The deal would later be rescinded due to a failed physical and would be traded a week later, while the Knicks get Cam Reddish and Solomon Hill for Kevin Knox and a protected first. Devin Booker drops 48 points. Kevin Durant would be out for at least 4 to 6 weeks. Zach LaVine has an MRI, and Lonzo Ball undergoes surgery from a knee injury. And Bulls teammate Alex Caruso would also have surgery after a dirty Grayson Allen shove. Nikola Jokic will drop a 49-point triple-double while Embiid gets 50 and 12 on 23 field goal attempts. Steph made his first career buzzer beater game winner against Houston, and Jayson Tatum drops 51 with 9 3-pointers. Victor Oladipo's return was to be rumored in February, and Suns GM James Jones gets a contract extension. Kings are out of the Ben Simmons sweepstakes with 2 weeks left until the trade deadline. The NBA All-Star starters are announced, which they are Durant, Giannis, Embiid, Trey, DeMar, LeBron, Jokic, Wiggins, Steph, and Ja. Shea suffers an ankle injury, and Kristaps Porzingis is injured from knee soreness. Bradley Beal got his wrist reevaluated, and Monty Williams will coach Team LeBron at the All-Star game. Now, this will be the end of January, and Joel Embiid would win his second consecutive Player of the Month, while Jokic wins in the West, and the Suns will be leading the West with an insane 40-9 record, while Chicago would have regained lead on January 31st of the East at 31-18, and some notable top 8 teams were the Charlotte Hornets, while the Pelicans were at 12th in the West. On February 1st, Joe Ingles would tear his ACL, but Cade Cunningham and Josh Giddey would be the January Rookie of the Month. Lance Stevenson would sign a season-long contract, and the All-Star reserves would be announced, with some snubs being LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, Drew Holiday, Jarrett Allen, Jaylen Brown, and DeJounte Murray. Joel Embiid would take over the number 1 spot in the MVP ladder. The Portland Trail Blazers would trade Norman Powell and Robert Covington to the Los Angeles Clippers for Bledsoe, Winslow, and Keon Johnson. Luka would enter top 10 in triple-doubles all-time with a 33-15-13 game against the 76ers, where the rim was broken, and Luka also posterized Dwight Howell. Eric Spoelstra would be the coach for Team Durant. 3 days before the trade deadline, Indiana would trade Karis LeVert for Ricky Rubio as salary dump and picks. LaMelo and DeJounte were all-star injury replacements. Portland would trade C.J. McCollum and Larry Nance Jr. to the Pelicans for Josh Hart, NAW, Sado, and a first. This would be a great trade for New Orleans, as even though they were out of the plan, they made it known that they want to win. On the same day, Indiana would trade Sabonis to the Kings so they could try and compete, but the Pacers would get Tyrese Halliburton as the star for the future, and Buddy Hield as well. Bradley Beal would be ruled out for the season. There'd be a couple of little trades the day before, but heading into the deadline day, there's a lot of hype. There'll be answers right away. The Spurs would trade Thad Young for Goran, protected first, as they would eventually buy out Dragic. The Bucks would also acquire Serge Ibaka, while the Kings get DiVincenzo and the Pistons pick up Bagley. While the Bucks and Kings would fit roles to make a late-season push, the Pistons would take a shot on Bagley, potentially being anything what we hope to be in the 2018 draft. The Suns would also trade Jalen Smith for Torrey Craig, and the Celtics would trade Dennis Schroeder, Ennis Freedom, Romeo Langford, and Josh Richardson for Daniel Tyson and Derek White. But the biggest trade would happen with about an hour and a half left, as the 76ers would finally trade Ben Simmons, as well as Seth Curry and Andre Drummond and 2 first-rounders for James Harden and Paul Millsap. The Ben Simmons saga was officially over, or at least we thought, and Harden was paired up with MVP candidate Joel Embiid. Now, there would be more trades, as the late one was Kristaps Porzingis to the Wizards for Dinwiddie and Bertans. The Montrezl Harrell was sent to Charlotte. The Simmons-Harden one was easily the biggest this deadline and one of the biggest in recent history. The trade would also lead up to one of the awkwardest and funniest All-Star draft moments, as KD repeatedly skips James Harden until he falls to the last pick. On that same day, Luka would finally drop a 50 bomb as he scored 51 in a win against the Clippers. Other than the deadline fallout, there wouldn't be much news until the All-Star break, other than Giddey, as he became the youngest player to record back-to-back triple-doubles, Chris Paul getting injured in the last game before the break, and Giannis dropping 50 on only 21 field goal attempts. Luka would again almost score 50, as he scored 49 with 15 assists. In the All-Star break, the NBA Top 75 team would all meet up, which would be a really historic event with all the best players of all time meeting up. Now, for the All-Star Showdown, Obi Toppin would win a very underwhelming dunk contest, while the Cavs won the skill challenge and Cat won the three-point contest. The All-Star game would also just be great, as Steph was spectacular, scoring 50 with 16 threes, as Team LeBron won 163 to 160. Now, getting back to the normal league, Dragic would sign with Brooklyn, and Denver would sign Boogie to a year-long deal. Kemba Walker would be ruled out for the year. Morant would set the Grizzlies' single-game scoring record with 46 points, and then would score 52 just next game. Markelle Fultz returns and plays in his first game in a year after tearing his ACL. At the end of February, the Heat reached 41 wins atop the East, while Boston had climbed their way up to 6th after starting 17 and 19. And in the West, Phoenix was far and away the number one team with 49 wins, while the Lakers had fell back on the race to overtake the Clippers, while New Orleans sneaks into the top 10 after a historically bad start. The MVP race also had three players by now, which were Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid, despite that partly being because of narrative. The players of the month will be DeMar DeRozan and Luka Doncic. Early in March, Kevin Durant would return after over 6 weeks out. Joe Harris would be sidelined for the rest of the season. Porzingis scored 25 in a win for his Wizards debut. On back-to-back nights, Garland would pass for 19 assists. Then LeBron would score 56 with 10 boards in a huge W against Golden State. And then Tatum would score 54 for his second 50-bomb of the year to beat Brooklyn, while Jokic had a 46-point triple-double. And 2 days later, Kyrie would score 50 on only 19 field goal attempts. Those 3 50-bombs would start out a March full of great performances. Jarrett Allen fractured his finger, and Ben Simmons missed a game against Philly. Popovich would tie Donnie Nelson on March 7th for coaching wins, and 4 days later he would have the most wins as the head coach of all time, which is great for a legendary and all-time great coach who is potentially nearing the end. Lou Dort would suffer a torn labrum and would be ruled out for the year. Malik Beasley would hit 11 threes in a game, which is a Timberwolves record. James Harden passed Reggie Miller for the third most threes all time at 2,561. The three-point leader, Steph Curry, would hit 20,000 points all time. LeBron would also get another 50-pointer, his second in just a week. Marcus Morris and Alex Caruso would return as Brooklyn would play Philly, and though Simmons was out, he would get a consistent plethora of boos at all times, and especially when he picked up the ball. Kevin Durant scored 53 against the Knicks, which is a record for a Nets player against the Knicks, and LeBron became the first member of the 30K point, 10K assist, 10K rebound club. Brook Lopez would play for the first time since opening night, and Garnett's number was retired by the Celtics, though he may want to forget that game, and even though it was amazing, they'd lose to Doncic. On the same day that both trained, Steph would score 45+, Karl Anthony Towns would score 60 and 70 rebounds, including 31 third-quarter points. The next day, Kyrie would drop a 60 bomb while shooting 8 for 12 from 3. Jonathan Isaac and TJ Warren was officially ruled out for the season. Spencer Dinwiddie hits a buzzer beater over the Nets. Curry is out from a foot injury, and Sadiq Bey scored 51 points. LeBron passed Karl Malone for number 2 on the scoring list, and Pat Williams returns after a 5-month absence. All-time six-man great Jamal Crawford officially retires, and IT signs a year-long contract with the Hornets. D-Book scores 49 with 10 rebounds, and Ja injures his knee and is out for 2 weeks. Young players Wiseman and Diallo are ruled out for the rest of the year. Raptors arena catches on fire and suspends the game for 70 minutes. Miles Turner, Yusuf Nurkic, Jeremy Grant, Josh Giddey, and Anthony Simons shut down for the season. Robert Williams tears his meniscus and will undergo surgery which will put him out for at least a month. Paul George finally returns after 43 games. Jaden Ivey and Johnny Davis declare for the NBA draft. With 44 points, Giannis passes Kareem as the Bucks' all-time leading scorer. Tomorrow drops a 50 bomb on the last day of March. Giannis and Jokic win Player of the Month. Steph was ruled out for the rest of the regular season, and Chris Paul passes Gary Payton as fourth in steals. Manu, Tim Hardaway Sr., George Karl lead 13 members that are inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Kevin Durant drops his second 50 bomb with 55 points in a loss, which was a career high. Pistons signed Carson Edwards. Kyle Lowry returns to Toronto, and Ben Simmons is ruled out for the play-in tournament. Jabari Smith declares. Lonzo Ball ruled out for the rest of the year as his knee had discomfort when the team tried to increase his rehab. Ty Washington declares. Anthony Edwards scores 49 and misses 4 late threes trying to get to 50. Jokic becomes the first player to be in the 2,000 point, 1,000 rebound, 500 assist club in one season of all time. After missing some games late in the season, LeBron would be shut down for the last 2 games. Evan Mobley returns, and Joel Embiid wins the scoring title. John Morant returns after missing 9 games. Gordon Hayward would be ruled out for the play-in tournament, while Luka suffered a calf strain in the last game of the season. The Lakers would also fire Frank Vogel, while Sacramento will move on from Alvin Gentry. Now, for the play-in tournament playoffs, I'll talk about series by series instead of all game ones at once. In the first day of the play-in tournament, the Nets would advance, and the Timberwolves and Pat Bev would win the championship. Advance. The celebration was legendary. The Hawks would then be the next team to move on, as Charlotte would lose in the first round of the play-in again, and would later fire head coach James Borrego. The Pelicans would also make it, as they would beat the Spurs by 10. In the play-in finals, villain Trey would return, as even though Jarrett Allen would suit up that game, Trey dropped 38 and eliminated the 8 seed Cavaliers on their home court. And on the other side of the play-in bracket, there would be chaos. As of the same day of the game, Paul George will be ruled out for health and safety protocols, and the 8 seed Clippers would lose to the Pelicans, led by McCollum's 30 and Larry Nance's monster 14-point, 16-rebound game. The first series I'll talk about is Heat Hawks, and it was a breeze. Almost the whole series, Trey would struggle, as he shot 1 for 12 in Game 1, 3 for 11 in Game 4, 2 for 12 in the elimination Game 5, and was held to single digits twice. Duncan Robinson would make 8 and 9 threes in Game 1, and Jimmy would score a then-career-high 45 points. The Hawks would steal Game 3 off a late floater by Trey, but in Game 4, the Heat would dominate. And in Game 5, even without Jimmy Butler, VO would be great, and they'd be able to prevail despite a great DeAndre Hunter 35-point performance. The Heat were moving on to the next round. The next series, though, was technically less competitive by games played. It was one of the best series. That, of course, is Celtics-Nets. Game 1 may have been one of the most memorable games of the playoffs, as even though Simmons didn't return for the Nets, they make it close and lose on a comeback spinning buzzer-beater layup by Jayson Tatum. The game also included Kyrie flipping off fans while scoring 39 points. Game 2 is not as close, as KD shot 4 for 17 and Kyrie shot 4 for 13 while taking part in Ramadan. But even with those two stars playing bad, the Nets would have a lead going into the fourth. They would choke it, as Jaylen Brown would score 10 fourth-quarter points, which was more than Durant and Irving combined. Also, during the season, Marcus Smart would win Defensive Player of the Year, as the first time a guard won it since Gary Payton in the 90s. In Game 3, Tatum would drop 39 and the Celtics would hold on to a late lead. In Game 4, Simmons didn't return like expected. Durant's 39 was not enough, as Boston would win the series and somehow sweep Brooklyn. After the series, a lot of blame was not put on Kyrie, but instead KD, who shot inefficient for 3 out of 4 games, and his best player in the world argument was virtually revoked. So the man who will be talked about next, Giannis, when the Bucks faced off against the Bulls. The series, though the Bulls did win a game, was never close and never in doubt. And though DeMar dropped 41 with no threes in Game 2 win, Giannis was the real star, as he averaged 29-13 off 57 field goal shooting and was purely dominant. The Bucks would win in 5 games, as the Bulls were banged up without their 3 main guards, and would move on to face Boston in this second round. But in the 4-5 matchup was the 76ers and Raptors, which was a very interesting roller coaster of a series. The first game, Max would score 38, and Embiid would have 11 free throws. And in Game 2 was worse, as he had 14 free throws, which was more than the whole Raptors would have as a team. And Scotty Barnes would also be injured and out Game 2. But in Game 3, it took a fadeaway buzzer-beater 3 by Embiid in overtime to win. The Raptors would come back in Game 4 and 5, but Van Vliet would also get injured, and a huge Game 6 win would prevent an 0-3 comeback. But Embiid would get injured in the end of Game 6 and miss the start of the second round. During that series, Scotty Barnes would become the third Raptors player to win Rookie of the Year. But on the flip side of the bracket was the Suns-Pelicans series, and it was way closer than it should have been. The Suns barely beat New Orleans in Game 1, and it was all because Chris Paul's spectacular 19-point fourth quarter. But Brandon Ingram's 37-point Game 2 tied the series up. Phoenix would squeak out a Game 3 win before the Pelicans would again tie the series up, And now Phoenix would win both Game 5 and 6 to end the series, but Chris Paul had to have a legendary Game 6 as he shot 14 of 14 as the best shooting performance in playoff history. Now in the 2-7 matchup was one of the best series as Minnesota faced off against Memphis. And the Timberwolves would upset the Grizzlies in Game 1, but maybe the weirdest thing is that a woman chained herself onto the basket, which was one of the multiple things that Timberwolves fans did. It was kind of weird. But in Game 2, Morant almost dropped a triple-double, and the Grizzlies tied it up before taking a lead in Game 3 as Morant actually did get a triple-double. Talk about Ja, who would win Most Improved Players during the series. In Game 4, Ja would get held to only 11 points, and Minnesota held on to a 1-point win, but in Game 5 and 6, Memphis would sneak out a couple of wins, move on to the second round against Golden State after they beat Denver. It would be a quick 5-game series that I won't talk about much except for the new death lineup, as the Warriors lineup of Steph, Poole, Clay, Wiggins, and Draymond would be absolutely elite, and Golden State easily beat the Nuggets. The last matchup of the first round was Dallas and Utah, and what a series it was. Luka was out for the first 3 games, and in Game 1, the Jazz would win from Mitchell's great second-half performance. But in Game 2, Brunson would hit 6 threes and score 51, combined with Maxi Kleber's 8 threes off the bench. The Mavs would upset the Jazz, and as a Luka Doncic and kind of Mavericks fan for the past 4 years now, this game was absolutely magical. And Brunson would again score 30 and win in Game 3 before a missed call, and Dwight Powell's 2 missed late free throws would spoil Luka's return. In Game 5, Luka and the Mavs would dominate. In Game 6, a wide-open Bogdanovic three caused by a illegal screen by Jordan Clarkson was missed, and Dallas was headed to the second round for the first time since 2011. During the first round, there were some players to declare for the draft, like Chet Holmgren, Mathurin, Banchero, Shadon Sharp, and RJ Nembhard. Now in the second round, the Heat would face off against Philly, and the series was kind of forgettable. In the first couple games, Embiid would be out, and Memphis would get out to an early 2-0 start, and Tyler Hero would win 6th Man of the Year. Now Embiid would return, and though he wasn't the cause for those 2 wins, they would win in Game 3 and 4, and we got a taste of prime James Harden. But in Game 5, Miami would have 7 players to get to double digits, and the Heat would pull away in the third quarter of Game 6 to move on to the Eastern Conference Finals against the winner of one of the best series this year, which was Milwaukee-Boston. Chris Middleton would be out for this whole series, with Giannis and Tatum going back and forth. Some of the better performances were Giannis' 42-12-8 Game 3, his 34-18 Game 4, 44-20 Game 6, and Tatum's 46-9 rebound Game 6 to tie the series up. In Game 7, it was all Boston, as they would dominate the last 3 quarters as the others hit their shots, including Grant Williams, who hit 7 threes, and Giannis' 25-20 was not enough to bring the shorthand defending champions to the conference finals. And talk about the conference finals, another 2021 NBA Finals team would not make it, as maybe the biggest upset of the season happened as Dallas took on Phoenix. In the first 2 games, Phoenix would dominate Dallas as the others struggled, but they would pick it up in the next 2 games, and it was tied at 2 apiece. In the Game 5, Phoenix win despite Chris Paul again struggling, but when D-Book went down, he stayed there and then he yelled at a fan that Luka special, insinuating Luka flops. When Luka went back to the locker room, he may have said what we look back on as one of the colder playoff moments in NBA history, as he said everybody acting tough when they up. The Mavs would then go on to win Game 6 before absolutely killing the Suns in a historically dominant victory, as Luka had as many points as the Suns at half, which was 27, and Phoenix had one of the most disappointing and laughable games in playoff history as the Mavs advanced to the Western Conference Finals. Before I talk about the last series, Nikola Jokic won MVP about halfway through. The finalists were Embiid and Giannis, while Booker, Luka, Tatum, Morant, Steph, Chris Paul, and DeRozan round out the top 10 voting. LeBron and Durant were also the other 2 players to get votes. But in the last conference finals, semifinal series, was the Warriors against the Grizzlies, and it was heated. And in Game 1, Ja would start out hot from beyond the arc, and Draymond would be ejected, but the Warriors would come back, and Ja would miss a potential buzzer-beater layup for game. In Game 2, Memphis would respond as Ja scored 47 points, but maybe the biggest storyline would be Dillon Brooks' dirty push to Gary Payton that would cause him to fracture his elbow. In Game 3, the Warriors would win by 30, but Ja would get injured trying to contest a three-pointer. Though Jordan Poole grab did cause a lot of internet discourse, though was not the reason he was injured. Despite a Game 5 Grizzlies blowout after the jaw injury, the series was pretty much over as the Warriors would win in 6. Also, over the time, the second round, Robert Covington would sign an extension with the Clippers. The Kings would hire Warriors assistant Mike Brown as their next head coach. Monty Williams would win Coach of the Year. Steph became the first player to hit 500 playoff threes, and Danny Green would suffer a torn ACL. The NBA would also have conference finals MVPs for the first time, which would be awarded to both conferences. In the West is Warriors versus Mavericks. Before I talk about that, the draft lottery happened, where the Magic ended up with the number 1 pick, and the Thunder, Rockets, Kings, and Pistons filled out the top 5. Now, on to the Western Conference Finals, the Warriors dominated. The Mavericks were tired, and though they did win Game 4, Kevon Looney absolutely killed Dwight Powell on the glass, and Maxi Kleber, and Steph Curry won Conference Finals MVP, despite a slightly disappointing series and just kind of boring. Now, in the East, it was much more entertaining. Miami and Boston would go back and forth, and it was a battle. Now, they were tied after 4, despite Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry clearly not being themselves and banged up, and Tyler Hero missed a majority of the season. But after a Game 5 loss, Butler would put the team on his back and drop 47 while only not playing 2 minutes in Game 6. Now, Game 7 would be one to go down for the ages, after Jimmy scored 35 while playing all 48 minutes, and the Heat made a late comeback, but a missed Butler 3 all but sold the deal for Miami, and Boston would be head to the NBA Finals with Tatum winning Conference Final MVP. Between the end of the Conference Finals and the actual Finals, not much happened other than the Cavaliers hiring Luke Walton as an assistant and them getting a newer logo collection. The 2022 NBA Finals were finally here. In Game 1, it did not let down expectations, as the Celtics would win the fourth quarter 40-16 and come back from double digits for the first time in Finals history. Before the next game, Quinn Snyder would step down as the Jazz head coach, which was kind of expected after the first round loss. Steph would then combine with Poole for 46 points in a Game 2 win, despite Clay's disappointing game, and Golden State tied it up going to Boston. In Game 3, Boston would again prevail, while the Warriors' offense went cold in the fourth quarter, and at the end of the game, Steph was taken out after Al Horford landed on his ankle, but luckily he was able to play in Game 4 in the rest of the series. Before Game 4, we also learned that Kenny Atkinson would become the next Hornets coach with a 4-year deal. But in Game 4, Steph would go off. The atmosphere in the stadium was amazing, but Curry would play villain, as he scored 43 with Williams' 16 rebounds, and Golden State's 9-point fourth quarter win would tie the series at 2. Before Game 5, the first offseason trade would happen, which was very early, but Denver would trade JaMychal Green and a future protected first to the 30th pick in this draft and 2 future seconds. And I expect that Green won't be on the roster past the trade deadline as a expiring older contract. Now, Game 5 was historic as Clay joined LeBron and Steph with 100 finals threes, but more importantly, Steph went to hit a three-pointer as he shot 0 for 9, which breaks a record 233 games of a made three-pointer. Despite that, Wiggins had a monster 26-13 game, and that led to the Warriors having a 3-2 series lead. Before Game 6, the big offseason trade occurred as Christian Wood would finally be traded, but it was for a small package as it was Trey Burke, Sterling Brown, Marquise Chris, and Boban Marjanovic, as well as the 26th pick, which will mostly be used with the 17th pick to get a top 10 pick. For Dallas, they get a rebounding big on an expiring contract. Game 6 would be a back-and-forth game, but other than an early Celtics 14-2 run, the Warriors would dominate despite runs from both teams, and with a late run, would win the 2021-2022 NBA Championship, with Steph Curry finally getting his first Finals MVP, and that is a complete timeline of the 2021-2022 NBA season. And I'm going to go off script here. This is the longest video and biggest project I've ever done on YouTube. I've been here for a few years, I think 4 years, across 3 channels, and this video is going to take 30 plus hours to edit, record, write. It's already taken 30 plus hours, and I've spent now 10 hours working on it in a row, pretty much. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for all your appreciation. Anyone that viewed this, if you're still here, just thank you for making my time actually mean something to, and I hope this was a good 30 to 40 minutes in your life. Now, yeah, thank you so much for watching.